just press go live. Great, we are live, so everything worked out fine. It's so
Amazing.
nice to have you, Advaita. We were in discussion for this meeting, and as I just said, I'm so excited to hear about what you do, about Jackhammer, because I know exactly what you do. We've been, we know we're in the space, but I never really had a chance to kind of delve into what you guys do. So, really excited to have this conversation. I think it'll be lovely before we start with the actual, retention and that stuff. I'd love to hear about you, how you got into this kind of style line of work, about Jack Hammer's story as well. Would love to hear a little bit about that.
Amazing. Thanks for having me. It's nice to see you again. So, for those who don't know us, Jackhammer is a boutique executive search firm. We work on very low volume, senior level roles across Africa. We are dual headquartered in Cape Town and Los Angeles. And we do have an American business, but we also have a lot of global clients who are either expanding or placing new leadership on the continent. And we have sector expertise in diverse industries. Jackhammer was established over 2 decades ago by our trailblazing CEO, Debbie Goodman. And she moved to Los Angeles to help us expand the business a few years ago. And I am the Africa MD, and I'm based in Cape Town. As I mentioned, we're sector diverse, we're sector agnostic, actually. Our roots have been in financial services, but over the years, we've worked in the NPO space, FMCG, retail, broader financial services and banking and insurance. We work in manufacturing. So we're really quite sector agnostic, and we work with great companies who want to place great leaders. Just a little bit about our culture. It's something that's really important to us as a business. We've been doing the remote thing for over a decade before COVID forced us home. So at any given time in our office location, you may only find 4 or 5 of us, but we remain connected to each other through a variety of tools. We use a WhatsApp group to connect with each other. We have a daily practice, a mindfulness practice called In the Flow, where we share over email what yesterday's best thing was for each of us. And we pick a new theme every week where we share what's going on in our lives. And this week, we're talking about what word should be in the Jackhammer dictionary, some words that are just innate to us that only we know the meaning of, but we actually want to share with our broad audience because we've worked with hundreds of clients and thousands of candidates over the decades, and they've been brought into our world a little bit, but we want to give a little bit more of us back to them.
Hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful to hear, because I'm sure that, when it comes to recruitment and your industry, I'm sure you have so many stories about recruitment and candidates and requests from clients. So it's really nice, I guess, to have that space to kind of digest it all and discuss it with the team, and that kind of check with everybody to see how, the team is doing. So that is lovely to hear. On that expansion to LA, was that like a chosen place to go and expand, or what was the decision like going that side?
Yes, so we found ourselves working for a few more American companies or American organizations that were expanding on the continent, and it just helps to have presence on the ground, somebody who can be able to talk both languages, as it were, even if it's not an actual language difference, but to be able to show that we're truly global in our approach. But we do have a thriving US business that focuses on the ed tech sector in developed markets. And then there are the clients that we service from Africa who are expanding into Africa
Mm,
and who have American headquarters or head offices.
mm. And what's the standard kind of like port of call, or how do clients find you, get to you? What's the kind of typical conversation they had with you in terms of what they need?
Well, certainly, generally, a client will have a very senior role that they need to find, and anybody can find us on the internet. Our website is www.jhammerglobal.com, and there is a specific need that a client needs to fill, and they approach us. We also have many clients that we work for on an ongoing basis. We are their preferred executive search firm when it comes to filling their executive level roles. Obviously, they're very happy with our work, but I think for many clients, there are talent acquisition teams within companies, and we're not trying to replace them. But often there are sensitive roles, or it just helps to have an intermediary who understands the market, but it it it's not really possible for an internal talent acquisition team to go to the competition and ask a CFO of a competitor company, would you be interested in joining us? And having the disintermediation that comes in the form of Jackhammer, where we're able to have those high level conversations and act as your proxy and act as your brand ambassador, that is immensely valuable to companies.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, there's so much about relationship building, right? I mean, it's key. And more so when you go like higher up on your recruitment needs, it's all about relationships. And how about that kind of pool of people that, because obviously you're not going to hit hand people that you placed before. So how does that work in terms of you finding the right candidates and maybe approaching them and doing that type of relationship management for your clients? Do you guys have like a specific approach to that, or?
Sure. So it's a very research based methodology. A client will come to us with a specific brief, and we know that they're in a certain industry. So, of course, we're going to map the aligned industries and look at who their competitors are, look at who the ancillary businesses are, and then start identifying people within those businesses who could, by virtue of their current job, step into the role that our client is looking to appoint. We'll also
Mm,
look at one level below for people who might be able to step up
mm,
into the role because they're ready for a next move, but there are no advancement opportunities at their current employer. So
mm,
the research piece is to be able to know where to look and how to identify those people. And we do that through a variety of tools. The other thing is that our network is extensive. We've been
mm,
working in the executive search industry for over 20 years, and we know people. So we might not know all the people who are in those roles, but we certainly know who to speak to help identify those people. And we do say to clients, access to our network expands yours. So we know that by the end of a process, we would have spoken to dozens of people in order to help a client identify the people who are going to be the right fit for their role. What we also offer is the ability to think outside the box. We're not just going to look at your competitors, we're not just going to look at your ancillary industries, but because we've been interviewing thousands of candidates, we might know somebody who maybe on paper they don't look exactly right and another recruiter might not approach them, but we know that they're capable of doing the job and we would introduce them to a process. But for a client, we're not expecting them to interview 20 candidates and we're not going to be sending them CVs over the course of a number of weeks. We're going through a rigorous process to shortlist candidates. And at the end of our process, our client should be engaging with 5 or 6 candidates who, by our assessment, meet the technical requirements of the role. And we've also done some assessments of culture fit and how they would work well with the rest of the executive team. And then our client's process takes over, and hopefully it becomes it's either an easy decision for them because they click with somebody right away, or it becomes so difficult because we've presented such great candidates.
With recruitment, I always find that there's some correlation with like the matchmaking industry, right? And
Absolutely.
and also property, because in its houses and people. So there's always that kind of like it is all really relationship building and networking, and as you mentioned, having access. So for higher up positions, it's a no-brainer to engage with people in the industry that have that expertise, that know the industry, know the key players, and it saves you so much time, right?
That is so
Um,
true. I think, sorry, just jump in. I think there are a lot of tools out there that want to try to automate these processes. And in some instances, I understand if you're dealing with a large volume or high volume of candidates, it does make sense. But at the end of the day, we're in the people business. We don't believe that any of this should be scaled through the use of technology, because you lose out the opportunity to get to know a real live human who's going to impact your business if you're only going to do things through the use of technology.
yeah, no, 100%. And have you ever said no to a client request? Because that happens as well. And I know when people reach out to you, they're obviously intentional because of the level of expertise that they're requiring. So there's probably a big need. They're not going to come and window shop for like, okay, who's there? But have you ever had to say no to a client because you just felt like it wasn't a fit for your company?
There have been instances where there's been a values misalignment, and there are times where we either have a very difficult conversation with the client to ask them where they're willing to flex, or, if a candidate would be comfortable to leave a job, because we're not going after candidates who are actively looking for jobs. We are attracting a passive market and actively headhunting candidates who may otherwise be very productive and doing a really great job elsewhere. So to make them consider leaving that role, the client has to have a really great employee value proposition, and we have to believe in them as a company. So yes, they've been rare, but there have been instances where we haven't felt comfortable working with a client, either because the role doesn't seem like the right fit for many people, or because we have mismatched values.
Mm, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and it becomes quite evident when you have those conversations, and there's not that alignment that you're kind of looking for, and that is so key, because you're going to be effective and you're going to do a successful,
Yes.
deployment of your services if that is there. So yeah.
That said, we do believe that there's a lid for every pot, and we try not to be too harsh in the judgment. So just because I personally might not want to work at a particular client doesn't mean nobody else will.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true. Cool. And looking into a conversation now from a retention point of view, I love to know, you that are in the talent acquisition game, how do you identify those key factors that influence the employee turnover in a company? Is there something that you ask your clients when you engage with them for the first time that kind of gives you an idea?
Mhm. Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I think many companies haven't actually done the deep dive into why people leave, because often it's believed that the reasons are disparate or they're unrelated. And yes, if it's a small percentage of employees leaving every year, it's probably not worth digging into the reasons. But when you reach high attrition rates, it's time to look at what you can do differently. And the actual number, the actual percentage, it will vary from level to level, from vertical to vertical, and from industry to industry. So, you probably expect high attrition in a call center environment, but it really should be quite low in a middle management finance function, for example. And the key place to get this information is in exit interviews. And you can start categorizing and making meaning out of the reasons people are leaving. So you know how to change. If you want to change, it could be they're getting better compensation and benefits elsewhere. In another company, they might get flexibility and work-life balance. There might be poor leadership within your own company that's pushing these people out. There might be limited advancement opportunities. There might be that misalignment of values or cultural preferences. Then there's nothing that a company can do if a person chooses to leave for personal reasons. But any of these others can, you can start categorizing them and turn them into data instead of anecdotes, and then work on a strategy on how you can retain your employees. And we do ask our clients these hard questions when we first brief with them. And that's when we're trying to help them articulate their employee value proposition. And
Mm.
sometimes they need to do some underlying work before they can think about attracting new people over.
Yeah, I hear you. Because I think, when it comes to recruitment, there's this thing where you obviously want to place for the client, but you also want to give this candidate better prospects. So you want to place with sustainability in mind, like long-term relationship. Do you ask that question in terms of like, if we put you forward for this company, for how long do you see yourself working
Mhm.
here, or is that part of the conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, we look at a candidate's track record, and say, that there's a certain amount of ethical headhunting that needs to be practiced. And we typically don't approach candidates who've been in the role for, depending on the industry, of course, who've been in a role for a year or under. We also look at how long they've been in their other roles and how many roles they've had over their careers. And some roles and some types of jobs, absolutely, it's appropriate to change every 2 to 3 years. And in others, it's not, especially when they're longer project cycles. And if it seems as if they haven't stayed in a role long enough to make a felt difference at the company,
Mm,
we would steer away from those.
mm,
And then we do ask them about what their propositions are, what their plans would be for the current client if they plan on taking up a role there. A good candidate and a good executive will be thinking a few years into the future. And if they can't see beyond the next 6 months, they're probably not the right fit.
hmm. Yeah. I mean, I can totally like understand that you look at a CV and you look at I think that's the first thing that I do when I look into a CV is to see how long they stayed in the roles. But you do have a very good point that you shouldn't also expect like a whole like a life commitment in a company because there's certain roles in certain industries that have
Yeah,
different rhythms. So something to consider as
absolutely.
well.
Yeah.
Mm,
And I do think a lot of companies think that their employee value proposition is so strong that somebody might not want to move. And maybe as a company, they do have a great offering, but then they also need to drill it down to the individual level. If they don't have those advancement opportunities for somebody internally, if their pay scales are not matched with the rest of the market, they also need to look at themselves to understand why somebody might leave or why somebody might not want to join them in the first place.
I hear you. And when it comes to executive searches, how does the CTC conversation goes? Is it something that gets discussed, like that needs to be off the table to discuss all the other stuff, or is it something that it's highly negotiable? How does that usually go?
I mean, typically there is a budget, but for certain roles, especially roles that haven't existed previously, there will be an amount of flexibility. A client will always look at what the return on investment is
Mm,
going to be, and they're not going to offer a package that is severely out of proportion with the value that they expect to derive from the person in the role. That said, there are market-related benchmarks for many roles and in many industries. For candidates, we do expect them to share what their package is just to make sure that they're within the realms of affordability and that we're not going to waste anybody's time. And also we know what the flexibility is from a client. So if a candidate expects a 35 to 50% pay rise from where they currently are, we will get realistic and say, I don't think that's possible. Would you be willing to flex on the base component in favor of a higher bonus potential?
mm,
And the higher up you go in an organization, the more creative
mm,
package structuring can become. And depending on the type of organization that you work for, it's no longer just a base plus the benefits like medical aid and cell phone and pension fund, plus the bonus, plus the long term share component, depending on whether the company is listed or not. Companies are getting very creative with how they structure packages and how they retain candidates and how they attract candidates. There could be sponsorship of a global MBA. There could be the offering of a sabbatical. So companies are getting creative, and candidates are also getting a bit more flexible in what they need. We'll never ask anybody to come into a role and be worse off
mm,
financially than they currently are, but there might not be the typical X percentage jump that you might have gotten in the
mm,
past.
I hear you. I mean, so many components, and so each situation is so unique. And I'm sure there's a lot of that kind of back and forth that you're doing and kind of working out. So you have to become a legal expert as well when you kind of like start these deals and very
But again,
interesting.
that negotiation is also a relationship element because a candidate wants to get what they're worth, but they also don't want to be too demanding for somebody who is ultimately going to end up being their boss. They don't want to be perceived as difficult. And on the other hand, clients often say, well, we're making a very generous offer. Why can't they just sign? And you really have to be the intermediary between these two and help them reach that point of reasonability and satisfaction where everybody's happy with the outcome and everybody knows that this one negotiation point, it's not going to be the basis of your relationship going forward. We're just making sure that everybody has the fairest, most satisfactory outcome possible.
Yeah, and when that happens, when you get people to kind of like agree, and I mean, I'm sure it's the best feeling ever. Yeah,
It really is, yeah.
nice. What happens when you place a candidate and either them or the company, after a while, come back to you and say, "Listen, this is not working out. Going
Sure.
back to the matchmaking, it's not working out."
So I think, we actually try to mitigate against that with a number of strategies on the candidate and the client side. For clients, we ask them to consciously check in with their appointed candidate even before they've started to make sure that their resignation and notice period are going well. And sometimes giving a candidate a week to a month between jobs to make sure they start the new role in the right frame of mind, that really helps. Because even though starting a new job it's really exciting, but there's also a period of mourning from leaving the old job. And we have to be quite mindful of that. It can be so lonely, especially if the old employer is really just trying to get what they want out of this person who's leaving, or they're being downright unpleasant. And you can forget the excitement of going to the new job. But if the new boss is checking in with a friendly WhatsApp or giving them a team update or telling them what's happening, how they're preparing for them, it can become less lonely and you won't forget that excitement component. And then in the week they start, the logistics have to be 100% taken care of. And what I'm about to say, it sounds so rudimentary and it sounds like such common sense, but so many companies actually fall down on this. And there's nothing worse than walking into a new office, you don't know where to park. No one's ordered a laptop for you. The security guard has no idea who you are. And it really helps to have one person in charge of your physical onboarding and be a guide and to set you up for success in your first week. Because imagine you've just left a well-functioning role elsewhere and you walk into this new environment. You actually don't know who anyone is. You've probably met 2 or 3 people in the interview process and the run up, and you're lost. You're absolutely at sea. And fine, some people are remote, and if the onboarding is going to be online, there needs to be this constant and meaningful interaction again to abate the loneliness. And again, I know it sounds like just really silly things, but you'd rather over prepare for this and take the candidates or the new starters lead on how much involvement they need. Even if it means setting up lunches for them so they can meet new team members, those things are going to be so appreciated in the long run. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I studied psychology, and a concept that I'll never forget is this. It's called the mnemic footprint, and what that means is that every first experience that you face, it means that you don't have anything to fall back onto in terms of your personal experience. So
Yeah.
you go into it with a very kind of naive, and anything that will taint that experience in a negative way, it's every time that you will go back, let's say, into the office again, then
Yeah.
it's going to kind of kickstart that
Like
kind of
a
emotion
trigger.
again.
Yeah.
Yes, it's that kind of connection that you're making, and the first one is going to kind of lead the way for all the future ones. Not forever, you can override it, but it takes so
Yeah.
you want to make sure that first impression. And the same with the candidate experience, when you go through the interview process, how that interviewer treated you or things like
Yeah.
that will also shape your experience with that company. How key is to get that right, because it's crazy to think that it's molding the kind of potential impact the person will have in your business.
Absolutely. And to go back to the earlier point about, if somebody feels that it's not working out, again, more of the mitigation strategies is for those mindful check-ins. Sometimes people start in a new role and they get stuck into the nuts and bolts of the job without looking up and thinking, am I happy in this environment? Have all my needs been met? Has the line manager been checking in with me? Have I gotten enough face time with the person that I'm working with? And these are little things, again, that as you get focused on execution, you're not thinking about those higher level things. So as a recruitment company, as a search company, we do check in with our candidates and clients.
Mm.
And depending on the cadence they need, we'll start with every month, and at the 6-month mark, probably make it a little bit less frequent. We make sure that everyone's still happy. If we sense a few little niggles, we ask them to get on top of it. But another thing that we do is we also offer coaching for candidates, and always remembering that change is hard for everyone, no matter how exciting it is. Changing jobs in the context of whatever else is happening in your life means that we really need to be mindful and intentional about making it work. And again, we'd rather overdo the preparation and dial it back based on the candidate and company needs. So we do offer that option to our clients. We have a sister company called Virtual Coaching Partners, and there is an onboarding or a new leader course or package that can be taken. And there are very few clients who don't take us up on that.
That's amazing. That's super unique, that type of offering, and so strategic, and kind of helping your cause, obviously, to make sure it's a successful placement. And at the same time doing so much for that person, as you said, that's kind of like made a massive change in their lives, and they have a space to kind of like walk through things.
Exactly. I mean, you've invested so much in bringing this person on, not just in, changing the role and investing in them and the monetary cost, but the emotional investment that's gone into bringing somebody on, it makes no sense why you wouldn't set them and yourselves up for success by not investing in a coaching or a seamless onboarding.
And does it happen that your clients like it so much that then they have coaching for all the other employees because they like the space?
Yes, it has happened. It's probably not as common as we would like, and not just from a business perspective. I think the landscape of corporate leadership could be so different if everybody had that space. Often people are promoted into roles because they're very good at what they do technically, but they're not always given the skills and the upskilling that's required to be able to manage a team or to manage different types of stakeholders. And there's so much soft skill, so many soft skills that we could impart that typically can are better delivered through an external third party who's not so mired in the complications of what it means to work in one place.
Yes, 100%. It is quite amazing how, one thing rolls into the other, from the candidate experience to like, okay, you got the role, okay, induction, okay, kind of probationary period, and then kind of performance or that kind of loop of retention, right? That now you're part of the business and having kind of walking hand in hand that experience with everybody in your business from, having a strategic HR department. When HR can do that, it becomes so strategic to the business, and it's quite like, yeah, the founder and HR work so closely on that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's such an ecosystem, and we really would love it if more people would take that ecosystem approach. And often, and it's really unfair, but HR is seen as a second thought, or it's as part of the business that is in charge of policies and rules, rather than being an enabler and being a driver of culture. And often there are businesses that look to HR purely to manage the operational aspects of what it means to have employees. And that's the payroll and the conflict resolution and the things that are important. But when you rely on your people team to drive the cultural element of your business, and you relate the people element to the business element, you're only going to get bigger success out of that.
Yeah, 100%. And then, do you help with any retention efforts for your clients after you place them? You did mention this coaching that you do for this initial part. Is there anything else that you have identified? Okay, when we do this, there's this knock-on effect on the engagement that you have kind of noticed.
Yeah, so for us, it's really the constant check ins to make sure that everybody is still on an even keel. And again, like I said, when you get into the execution mindset, it's very easy to do the job. But when we check in with our place candidates, we make sure that they've met all the people in the business that they should be meeting. And if it's a client that we've worked with for a long time, as often happens, we might be able to set up some of those conversations without stepping on anyone's toes inside the business, or just have a quiet word and say, do you know what, the new candidate hasn't met these people yet, probably a good idea to set up that sort of conversation. So it's about integrating them into the business as much as possible. And I think that's what everybody's looking for, to be able to feel that sense of belonging. And those are just the practical ways in which to do it. And then we, the more high level check-ins that we have are talking about, do you feel satisfied? Do you see purpose in what you do? Are you seeing the future? Are you planning for this project? Are you planning for the next promotion? Are you planning for, it's a 6, 12, 18 months down the line, and having those conversations, not just with the candidate, but with the line manager and the person for whom we place that role.
I hear you. Yeah, I mean, that kind of feedback and having that channel open, and it looks like you have quite a key role on the kind of retention side, really keeping this relationship going and making sure this, you're aligned with the founder and that this candidate is, has settled in and is enjoying what they do. Something that we also do, which I always say, works really well for us when it comes to retention, and again, going back to this kind of very strategic HR function, is that we always want to understand where the business is at. is the business growing? Is the
Yeah.
business pivoting? Is the business going through a constraint? And also, per quarter, what are the goals? What are you trying to achieve? And try it through our performance management. So all the retention, kind of initiatives, to make sure we feed this information to everybody on the ground, because that sometimes it's often missed, that founders or executives, maybe they know what's going on, but it's sometimes very difficult to bring it in, into conversation and to make it part of the daily happenings in the business. So making sure that everybody's kind of aware how the business is doing is quite key for them to know, okay, there's a place for me here, and I can kind of link it up to my career growth. And that's really when you know that you have a good company, because they are noticing you, and that also the company's, has a good plan in mind.
Absolutely. And I think, again, you'd rather over communicate than under communicate. As long as everybody is on the same page, everybody's going to be pulling in the same direction with the same velocity. And that's what you really want. But also, there's a part about culture and making sure that your company culture is more than just the pictures you choose to have on the walls and the words on your website. How does it pervade into every interaction you have? Because if you talk about how you have flexibility, but it's still, somebody is still missing their child's cricket match or whatever the case may be, you know how does that actually translate into lived examples within your environment, and making sure that there's cohesion?
Yeah, that's such a big point. And on those, kind of what other initiatives from a retention point of view a company can put in place, we always say, look, we need to make sure the basics are in place before we go into thinking of more, evolved, or, on the
Yeah.
fun side. It's, are we listening to people? Do we have a channel where they can comment on the challenges or the difficulties? And then on top of that, do we have a career development in place? Have they told us where they want to go next? Because if that is not in place, what's the point in, doing the team building, taking people? Because as you say, they're going to be thinking of a child missing the cricket match, as opposed to, like, kind of really meaningfully engaging with the team. So yeah, that's
Yeah, and I think in an era where we're hyper aware of mental health challenges, is your environment a place of psychological safety? And it doesn't mean every company needs to be a copy paster of another, because we all have our own challenges that we're working with as a business, within the industry, and with the teams that are around us. But what does psychological safety mean for this environment, and how can we make sure it manifests itself on a daily basis? And I mean, it's a lot like raising children, isn't it? They want predictability, and they need to know that they're in a safe space. And yes, often people will test the boundaries, as they should. But what is the boundary, and how do we deal with anyone who oversteps the boundary? And how do we, as business leaders, make sure that we create that environment where people can thrive?
Yeah, 100%. Part of our initiatives is we have a weekly engagement, and we have the question around what difficulties did you face this week, the same way we have the question, what was the highlight of your week? And I always say I'm so impressed with how actually people want to connect and want to disclose and want to engage. And we mentioned the transparency levels of the exercise, meaning your managers will see this, HR will see this, because we obviously want to work with it. If it stays confidential, we can't work with it. So I'm always extremely surprised how people find it, like, refreshing to actually have a place where they can actually comment, how they're doing. And obviously, it's imperative that when we receive that information, we work with it,
Yes,
to do something about it. No, it's not just that it gets there, because otherwise people won't really trust the space, to say it in a way.
exactly. It does
Yeah.
need to be authentic, and I suppose celebrate all the good things, as well as address any negative feedback, and again address it, like you say, in a transparent way,
Mm.
and show that, and admit if you've made a mistake.
Mm.
As human beings, we all want connection. It's
Yes.
part of our biological imperative, really. And
Mm.
you want to be able to connect with people who see you for you and understand
Mm.
what makes you tick, and you want to see them as real.
Yeah. And what's interesting about this retention kind of work is that it definitely links back to talent acquisition, right?
Yeah.
Because it is a life, it's a cycle, a work cycle. And I'm sure it's interesting, how because you obviously the moment you recruit for someone, that person is leaving a company. So understanding as well the reasons why they're leaving, why they're ending that cycle, why is it not working for them. Did you ever have that the company that they left wanted you to recruit, and then you were like, kind of like, do you disclose, or how does that work?
I mean, look, again, on the point of ethics, we don't headhunt from our clients or from our active clients. So that's one element. There have been a few instances where that's happened, but it's seldom seen as a conflict because although they might have lost a person, it sometimes presents an opportunity either to reimagine the role or to find somebody within the business who is ready for the next step up and who otherwise might not have had the chance. So yes, there have been times where may have been hard feelings, and there have been companies who have asked us to stop approaching their people. But people are moving for their own advancement. Companies don't own people, and if a candidate is considering a move elsewhere, it's a good opportunity for a client or for a company to ask why.
Yeah. Oh, I agree so much with that. I mean, as you said, exit surveys are quite telling. And I think the moment you start seeing patterns, is that, I
Yes.
mean, it can't get more telling than that, right? Like, you spot something that's going on. We recently had a client that went through a merge process, and it did happen that after the merge process, a lot of people were, not necessarily buying into the new culture, because it was like from being a small business to now being part of a group. And that was such an interesting experience to go through, because what we identified is that it wasn't necessarily that the culture of the group was different. It was the times it was taken for the change to happen. So we really had to get that yes final approval, that when you're a small business, you get it straight away. Now we would have
Yeah.
to, so that kind of corporate layer that was
Sure.
added, people were like, no, sorry, we can't work like that. So,
That's fair enough. But I think, with any change, sometimes a merger or an acquisition or something like this, people who might otherwise have been very happy or maybe just suffering from a bit of inertia, this is almost like a watershed moment. And I think companies should probably prepare for, if there's going to be some sort of activity like that, you're likely to lose a few people. It's probably not the end of the world. Fresh thinking and fresh blood and new ideas, that doesn't hurt, but it is always a heart sore to lose a person. And you don't want to dismiss the people element of it, but I think it's an outcome that a lot of businesses should come to expect.
yeah, 100%. And then you have the other side, where it's not so much on it's when the company realizes it's not working anymore with this
Yeah.
person. And sometimes it's long-standing employees that have given a lot of their life to the business, and it's really heartbreaking. But it's also time to say, look, this is just not working out. We're not getting what the company needs out of this engagement,
Yeah.
which is also a hard one to face.
It is. And I mean, I hope that people are mature enough to still stay in touch with the people who leave. You never want to close doors. And given that you spend so much of your life at work engaging with the people that you work with, it's actually, again, you go through a period of mourning where you don't have that daily interaction anymore. But you have to take a step back and think, was this relationship sufficiently good enough that I do want to stay in touch with this person, albeit that they may be leaving me, or rather they're leaving a job, they're not leaving me as a person.
I hear you. It's a life-changing moment, right? It's time to kind of reflect back and think, with positivity, what's next for you, and make the most out of it. Um, we are kind of on time. We actually kind of went further with time, but we do have one comment that I just want to touch
Okay.
base on. It says, problem we all facing. We are promised how amazing companies are. This is the complete opposite. Once you start, you see the cracks. But I believe companies are facing mismanagement, and then a person needs to start the hunt all over again.
Sorry, I missed the first part of the comment.
It says, problem we're all facing. We are promised how amazing companies are. This is the complete
Yes.
opposite. Once you start, you see the cracks. But I believe companies are facing mismanagement, and then the person needs to start the hunt all over again.
Absolutely true. And I think, a lot of the time candidates aren't asking, or rather companies aren't willing to be interviewed themselves, because it is, like you said, it's a courting or it's a matchmaking kind of process. And it's not just a company that needs to anoint a candidate and say, yes, you are the chosen one, I want to bring you into my fold. Companies and line managers also need to be prepared to answer questions from candidates. Why, first, why is this role vacant? Did something happen with the last person that they felt the need to leave? What are your advancement opportunities? What's your leadership style? What is your value proposition as a leader, and your value proposition as a company? How do you handle disputes? And all these really tough questions, some of them very practical in nature and some of them very high level. But unless a company is willing to engage on this, it's like Sean said in the comments, the hunt will start all over again because of a misalignment.
Mm. Yeah, it's so true. One of the findings with our retention tool that we do, we call it Pulse, and what we found is that our engagement rate from employees is very, very high. As I said, people love to have that space where they can reflect on a weekly basis on their work. But what we have seen is how managers shy away from giving kind of constructive feedback, right? So when it's positive, the engagement is there. When there's like development is needed, and there's a shy away from that comment. And I have myself seen that particularly in South Africa, that when it comes to culture, people really engage and very positive, but shine away from that constructive feedback.
Yeah.
And that is something that we realize part of being a manager and really helping this person, crafting their career. It comes with delivering the hard messages, and that person will appreciate it, right? Because you are at the end of the day a manager that should be kind of helping this person on their journey. And that's and then we delved into it. Why is that message difficult to come across? One of the things that I noticed, and this was a little bit heartbreaking, is that it just took time to think how to digest that feedback and plan an action. Because the moment someone is bringing you a difficulties, like people dynamics, right? And then it's difficult to kind of like, okay, how do we now, with what you're telling me that you're experiencing, how do we put an action in place? So it was just the time that it required to sit back and think about that person, how to really help them. What managers, and I'm not saying it's just that maybe they don't have the time because they also have jobs, right? But 100%, what a situation. And I think what I would say to Sean there is that take the reins when you see that's happening, call it out, and really try in a constructive way to to make it work. When you see the cracks, work on them, and that will make you being identified as a leader. So what a great turnaround, right?
Absolutely. And just to take it one step back on the reviews or the delivering of slight negative feedback, I think as humans, we don't want to say negative things. One, because we want to be liked, or we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And many managers and leaders haven't actually been trained and upskilled and shown how to deliver feedback, because sometimes, it's given as received, or received as a problem rather than a development area. And like you say, putting the action plan in place. So those two things need to be connected. It's, I'm giving you this feedback and here's how we're going to work on it. And this doesn't have to be a big drama.
100%. Demystify the whole and it's like, no, let's dive into it. This is what's going to make you grow. And so yeah, lovely work to get done on that side. Cool. Thank you so much, Advaita. That was such a nice conversation to hear a little bit more about, your inner workings, that you guys have really special ways that's why you're so successful, right? And to connect talent acquisition to retention, which, I mean, they're kind of, it's a cycle.
It's a cycle. Yeah. Thanks so much, Rose.
Cool. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
Bye.
Bye.